She accepted the deal, but now the billionaire says that the baby and the mother belong to him forever. Hello, let's start another beautiful story. Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's go. The red final notice stamp on the eviction warning burned into Ava Carter's vision as she stood in the dim hallway of her Brooklyn apartment. $3,000 by the end of the month, or she and Lena would lose everything. At 26, Ava's life had become an endless cycle of double shifts between the restaurant and department store, yet they were still drowning in debt. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the debt collector, the fourth today. Ava slipped into the bathroom, pulling out her emergency fund hidden behind old prescription bottles. $247. The sight of it made her stomach clench. Not even close to what they needed. Ava, Lena's voice drifted through the door. I made some tea, and I wanted to show you my NYU application essay. Ava quickly tucked the money away and opened the door. Her sister stood there, all gangly limbs and bright eyes at 17, holding two steaming mugs. The sight of her made Ava's chest ache. Lena deserved so much more than their cramped apartment and constant financial struggles. Thanks. Ava accepted the tea, forcing a smile. Let me change out of my work clothes first. Back in their shared bedroom, Lena settled at her desk, laptop glowing in the growing darkness. Their mother's old armchair sat in the corner, draped with Lena's school sweater. Sometimes Ava swore she could still smell their mother's perfume on it, even though she'd been gone for almost 5 years now. As Lena began reading her essay aloud, Ava's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Ms. Carter, I represent Damian Lancaster. He would like to discuss a business proposition tomorrow, 2 p.m., Lancaster Tower. This could solve your current financial difficulties. The name sent a chill down her spine. Damian Lancaster, the billionaire investor whose cold, calculating face she'd seen on countless magazine covers. How did he know about her situation? More importantly, what could someone like him want from someone like her? Ava? Are you listening? Lena's voice pulled her back to reality. Sorry, just a work thing. Ava squeezed her sister's shoulder. Keep going. I want to hear how it ends. The next afternoon found Ava standing in Lancaster Tower's gleaming lobby, feeling painfully out of place in her second-hand navy dress. She'd called in sick to both jobs, knowing she couldn't afford to miss work, but also knowing she couldn't afford not to be here. The executive elevator carried her to the top floor, where a pristine assistant in a white suit led her through a maze of glass offices. They stopped at an imposing set of double doors, and with one sharp knock, Ava's world shifted on its axis. Damian Lancaster stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his presence commanding the room even before he turned to face her. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered in his perfectly tailored suit. When he turned, steel-grey eyes assessed her with clinical precision. Ms. Carter, his voice was deep and entirely without warmth. I understand you're in need of financial assistance. Ava lifted her chin, pride stiffening her spine. I don't know how you know about my situation, Mr. Lancaster, but I'm not here for charity. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, I imagine. You're not. He moved to his desk, picking up a folder. I have a proposition for you, one that would solve all your financial problems and secure your sister's future. Something in his tone made Ava's heart race. What kind of proposition? I need an heir, Ms. Carter, and I believe you're the perfect candidate to provide one. The words hit her like a physical blow. You want me to have your baby? Yes. He stated it as simply as discussing the weather. In exchange, I'll clear all your current debts, provide for your sister's education through graduate school if she wishes, and ensure you never have to worry about money again. Ava's mind spun. This had to be a joke or a trick. Why me? Lancaster, circled his desk, moving closer. You're healthy, intelligent, and most importantly, desperate enough to consider it. I've had you thoroughly vetted. No drug use, no criminal record, excellent genetic health markers. He paused, standing close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. And you have something to protect. Someone to protect. Lena's face flashed through Ava's mind, her sister's dreams, her potential, all the things she'd promised their mother she'd safeguard. How much exactly are we talking about? The words escaped before she could stop them. Lancaster's smile was predatory. Everything. Your debts cleared immediately, your sister's full college tuition wherever she's accepted, and a trust fund for both of you. He slid a contract across his desk. All you have to do is sign. I need time to think about it. You have until tomorrow. His tone left no room for negotiation. The offer expires then. Ava nodded stiffly and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Ms. Carter. She looked back. Remember, sometimes the price of freedom is choosing which cage to occupy. Outside in the crisp autumn air, Ava's phone buzzed with another message from the debt collector. In her mind, Lancaster's words echoed like a prophecy. She had 24 hours to decide which cage would be hers. Ava spent the night staring at her cracked bedroom ceiling, Lancaster's contract burning a hole in her bag. On the twin bed across the room, Lena slept peacefully, unaware that her sister was contemplating selling her future to secure theirs. The alarm clock's red digits blinked 3:47 a.m. In less than 12 hours, Lancaster's offer would expire. Ava slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, pulling the contract from her bag. In the harsh fluorescent light, the legal language seemed even more daunting. Terms like genetic material, parental rights, and confidentiality agreement jumped out at her. Her phone lit up with a text from Antonio's restaurant. Morning shift cancelled, slow week, another day's wages gone. Ava's hands trembled as she reached for the coffee maker, their mother's old one, held together with duct tape and prayers. As the coffee brewed, she pulled up her banking app. Negative $28. The overdraft fee would hit tomorrow, taking them even deeper into the red. The department store didn't pay for another week, and tips from the restaurant barely covered groceries. Dawn crept through the kitchen window as Ava made her decision. She wouldn't just be saving herself, she'd be saving Lena. Her sister deserved more than community college and crushed dreams. You're up early. Lena appeared in the doorway, school uniform already on. Everything okay? Ava quickly tucked the contract away. Just work stuff. Want some coffee? Can't. Running late for study group. Lena grabbed her backpack. But hey, good news. Ms. Reynolds thinks I have a real shot at the NYU scholarship. Ava's heart clenched. Even with a scholarship, they'd never afford the remaining tuition. Unless... That's amazing, Lena. I'm so proud of you. After Lena left, Ava showered and put on her one good dress again. This time, she pulled her curls into a tight bun, professional, controlled, ready for battle. She had questions for Lancaster, and she wouldn't sign anything until she got answers. The morning rush-hour subway was packed, but Ava barely noticed the crush of bodies. Her mind raced through scenarios. What if Lancaster changed the terms? What if this was all an elaborate trick? What if she signed and he still evicted them? Lancaster Tower looked different in the morning light, less intimidating, more real. The same receptionist from yesterday gave her a slight nod of recognition as she headed for the executive elevator. This time, Lancaster was waiting at his desk. Ms. Carter, your punctuality is appreciated. I have questions. Ava remained, standing gripping the contract in her hands. Naturally, he gestured to a chair. Please. The money, I want it in writing. Exact amounts, payment schedules, everything. Lancaster slid a document across the desk. Already prepared. Your current debts total $47,000. They'll be cleared by close of business today. Your sister's education fund will contain $500,000, accessible upon her college acceptance. Your personal trust fund will be $2 million, with quarterly payments beginning after the birth. The numbers made Ava dizzy. And the medical aspects? Top fertility specialists, private health care, complete discretion. His eyes narrowed. I assume you're not currently in a relationship? No, Ava lifted her chin. But I want it in writing that after the baby is born, I'm free to date whoever I want. Something flashed in Lancaster's eyes, too quick to identify. Of course, though you'll understand the need for background checks on any potential partners who might be around the child. The child, their child, the reality of what she was agreeing to hit Ava full force. One more thing. She met his gaze steadily. I want to be involved in the baby's life, not just as a surrogate, but as their mother. Lancaster studied her for a long moment. That was always the intention, Ms. Carter. I'm not looking for a mere incubator. I want my child to have two parents. Even if those parents hate each other. A slight smile curved his lips. Hate is a strong word for two people who barely know each other. Let's call it professional distance. Ava took a deep breath and uncapped her pen. Where do I sign? Are you certain? Lancaster's voice was quietly intense. Once you sign, there's no going back. I'm certain. She scrawled her signature on the dotted line before she could change her mind. Lancaster signed next, his elegant script a stark contrast to her hasty scrawl. My driver will take you to the clinic for initial tests this afternoon. By this time tomorrow, all your financial troubles will be over. He held out his hand to shake. Welcome to the family, Ms. Carter. Ava shook his hand, his grip firm and cold. As she followed his assistant back to the elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with the devil. But when her phone buzzed with a notification from her bank, deposit received $47,000, she knew there was no turning back. In the sleek black car Lancaster had sent, Ava finally let herself cry, not from sadness or fear, but from relief. For the first time in years, she could breathe. Lena would go to college, they would keep their apartment, they would survive. But as the car turned toward the fertility clinic, Ava wiped her tears away. She couldn't afford to be weak now. Whatever game Lancaster was playing, she needed to be strong, because something told her that his interest in her went beyond mere genetics, and this contract was just the beginning. The fertility clinic looked more like a luxury spa than a medical facility. Marble floors, soft music, and the gentle sound of flowing water from an indoor fountain created an atmosphere of calm that did nothing to settle Ava's nerves. She sat in a plush leather chair, filling out endless forms about her medical history, while trying to ignore the fact that Damien Lancaster himself sat 3 feet away, scrolling through his phone with casual indifference. Mr. Lancaster? A nurse appeared, immaculate in pale blue scrubs. Dr. Chen will see you both now. Dr. Chen's office was warm and inviting, with degrees from Harvard and Johns Hopkins displayed on the walls. The doctor herself, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind designer glasses, smiled as they entered. Miss Carter, Mr. Lancaster, let's discuss the process ahead. She opened a sleek laptop. Given the timeline you've requested, we'll need to start hormone treatments immediately. Ava's head snapped up. Timeline. I have a board meeting in Shanghai next month, Lancaster stated without looking at her. We need to attempt conception. Before then. Attempt? Ava's voice trailed off as realization hit. They wouldn't be using artificial insemination. He expected them to. The natural method has the highest success rate, Dr. Chen explained gently, reading Ava's expression. Especially given your excellent health and Mr. Lancaster's preliminary tests. Ava's cheeks burned. Somehow, in all her anxiety about the contract, she hadn't fully processed this part. She'd have to sleep with him, have actual physical intimacy with this cold, calculating man. The hormone treatments will take approximately 2 weeks, Doctor, Chen continued. During that time, you'll need daily injections and regular monitoring. Once we confirm ovulation, I'll clear my schedule, Lancaster interrupted. His tone was businesslike, as if discussing a merger instead of the conception of his child. Dr. Chen turned to Ava. Do you have any questions about the hormone protocol? 1,000 questions swirled in Ava's mind, but one pressed forward. Side effects. Mood swings, bloating, headaches. Some women experience emotional volatility. Dr. Chen's eyes were sympathetic. It's a lot to process. Would you like to discuss this privately? Lancaster stood smoothly. I'll wait outside. Once the door closed, Dr. Chen leaned forward. Miss Carter, are you sure about this? Once we start the hormone treatments, I'm sure. Ava's voice was steadier than she felt. I need this to work. The doctor nodded slowly. Then let's do a physical exam and get your first injection today. An hour later, Ava emerged from the examination room with a bandage on her arm and a bag full of medications. Lancaster waited in the reception area, still absorbed in his phone. My driver will take you to and from your appointments, he said. Standing, Julia will coordinate the schedule. He finally looked at her properly. How are you feeling? The question caught Ava off guard. Was he actually showing concern? Fine, just processing. Dinner tonight, he stated abruptly. We should discuss logistics. The car will pick you up at 7. Before Ava could protest, he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne. She looked down at the bag of medications in her hand and felt the weight of reality settle. Over her, this was really happening. At home, Ava stared at her closet. What did one wear to dinner with the father of their future child, the man who now owned their financial future? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car arriving in 30 minutes. Restaurant dress code, formal. She finally chose a simple black dress, another thrift store find that could pass for designer in dim lighting. As she applied mascara, her hand trembled slightly. The hormone injection site on her arm ached. The restaurant was exactly what she expected from Lancaster. Exclusive, elegant, and probably cost more per meal than she made in a week. The maître d' led her to a private dining room where Lancaster waited, his suit even more expensive than the ones he wore at the office. Wine, he offered as she sat. I probably shouldn't. The medications. He nodded approvingly. Smart. I appreciate someone who takes their responsibilities seriously. Is that what this dinner is? Checking up on your investment? Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, annoyance. This dinner is about getting to know the mother of my child, unless you'd prefer to keep things purely clinical. Ava took a sip of water, buying time. Why me? Really? There must be thousands of women who'd jump at this chance. Women from your world. Women from my world come with complications, expectations, hidden agendas. Lancaster studied her over his wineglass. You're refreshingly straightforward. Ms. Carter, you want security for your sister and yourself. Simple, clean. There's nothing simple about this. No? He leaned forward slightly. You need money. I need an heir. Seems straightforward to me. A waiter appeared with their first course, something French that Ava couldn't pronounce. As she picked up her fork, Lancaster's eyes followed the movement. You have questions, he stated. Ask them. Ava put her fork down. Why now? Why the rush for an heir? My father is dying. Lancaster's voice was flat, emotionless. Brain cancer. He has 6 months, maybe less. The succession plan for Lancaster Holdings requires a clear line of inheritance. I'm sorry, Ava said automatically. Don't be. He's a bastard who made my childhood hell. Lancaster took a measured sip of wine. But he did teach me one thing. The family is power, and I intend to secure mine. Ava felt a chill despite the room's warmth. And what about love? Doesn't your child deserve that? For the first time, real emotion crossed Lancaster's face. Something dark and complicated. Love is a luxury, Miss Carter. One I never had and never needed. But don't worry. You seem to have enough of it for both of us. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of expensive food and careful conversation. But as Lancaster's driver took her home, Ava couldn't shake his words about love being a luxury. She placed a hand on her abdomen, where soon a new life would grow, and made a silent promise. Their child would know love whether Lancaster wanted it or not. 1 week into hormone treatments, Ava learned what Dr. Chen meant by emotional volatility. She stood in Lancaster's private bathroom at the fertility clinic, gripping the marble counter as tears streamed down her face. The morning's blood test had shown her hormone levels weren't rising fast enough. Another round of increased dosage. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Carter," Lancaster's voice, "the car is waiting." "Just a minute." She splashed cold water on her face, willing her hands to stop shaking. When she emerged, Lancaster stood waiting, his expression unreadable. "You're pale." "I'm fine." Ava tried to step past him, but her knees buckled. His hand shot out, catching her elbow. Clearly, his touch was firm, but not unkind. "When did you last eat?" The question made her realize she couldn't remember. Between the morning sickness from the hormones and rushing to appointments between work shifts, food had become an afterthought. "I had..." She trailed off as the room swayed slightly. Without another word, Lancaster guided her to his waiting car. "Change of plans, James," he told the driver. "The bistro on 5th. Mr. Lancaster, I have to get to work. You have to eat." His tone brooked no argument. "I won't have you collapsing and jeopardizing this process." The bistro was small, but elegant. Lancaster ordered for both of them, soup, bread, and what turned out to be the best grilled salmon Ava had ever tasted. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food arrived. "Better?" he asked as she finished the last bite. "Yes, thank you." She hesitated. "But I really do need to get to work. I can't afford to lose any more shifts." Lancaster's jaw tightened. "You don't need to work anymore. The trust fund isn't active until after the birth." Ava met his gaze steadily. "And I won't touch Lena's college fund. I need to keep my jobs." "Stubborn," he muttered, but there was something like respect in his voice. "At least let me have James drive you." Back in the car, Ava felt Lancaster watching her. "What? Move in with me." The words hung in the air between them. Ava stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me? It's logical. You're exhausted from commuting between appointments. My penthouse has plenty of space. You and your sister would each have your own room. It would make the process more efficient." "Efficient?" Ava repeated. "Is that all this is to you? A process?" Something flickered in his eyes. "What else should it be?" "I don't know, maybe something human." The hormones made her bolder, more reckless with her words. "You're creating a life, not closing a business deal. Aren't I doing both?" His voice was soft but sharp. "That was our arrangement, Miss Carter. Don't pretend it was anything else." The words stung more than they should have. "You're right. Silly me, thinking the father of my future child might see me as more than a business transaction." Lancaster leaned forward, his presence suddenly overwhelming in the confined space. "And how exactly should I see you, Miss Carter? As a romantic prospect? A future wife? Is that what you're angling for?" "No, as a human being." The tears were, "Damn these hormones. Someone going through a difficult medical process to give you what you want. Someone who deserves basic kindness, if nothing else." The car stopped outside the department store where she worked. Lancaster was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Finally, he spoke. You're right. Ava blinked in surprise. The offer to move in stands, he continued. Not for efficiency, but for your health and comfort. Think about it. He handed her a business card. My private number. Call if you need anything at all. Ava took the card, their fingers brushing. A jolt of awareness shot through her, and she quickly pulled away. Thank you. And Ava? The use of her first name made her pause. Take care of yourself, please. That night, lying in bed, Ava stared at Lancaster's business card. His private number was handwritten on the back, the elegant script at odds with the modern typeface on the front. Like the man himself, polished and professional on the surface, but with unexpected moments of humanity underneath. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. Dr. Chen called. Your levels are improving. Rest well. Such a simple message, but it made something warm unfurl in her chest. Dangerous, these hormone-induced feelings. She had to remember what this was. A contract, nothing more. Lancaster had made that clear. But as she drifted off to sleep, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, Ava couldn't help wondering if he'd meant what he said about basic kindness. And if he had, what did that mean for their carefully constructed arrangement? You're moving where? Lena stared at Ava across their tiny kitchen table, her spoonful of cereal frozen halfway to her mouth. Ava took a deep breath. After 3 days of deliberation, countless pros and cons lists, and one more nearly fainting episode at work, she'd made her decision. Mr. Lancaster has offered us temporary accommodation while I undergo medical treatments. Medical treatments? Lena's eyes narrowed. Is that why you've been sick every morning? Ava, what's really going on? The moment Ava had dreaded had arrived. She'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but now the carefully prepared words felt inadequate. I made a deal with him, a contract that will secure our future, including your college education. What kind of contract? When Ava hesitated, understanding dawned on Lena's face. Oh my God, you're having his baby, aren't you? It's not what you think. Really, because I think my sister sold herself to some rich guy to pay for my tuition. Lena pushed away from the table, chair scraping against the linoleum. I never asked for this, Ava. I would have been fine with community college. But you shouldn't. Have to be fine with it. The words burst out of Ava. Mum wanted better for you. I want better for you. Mum wouldn't have wanted you to become some billionaire's broodmare. The silence that followed was deafening. Lena's hands flew to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Pack your things. Ava cut her off, voice tight. The car comes at noon. Lancaster's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek high-rise in Manhattan. The elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than their entire apartment, all marble and glass with views that made Ava's head spin. Your rooms are upstairs, Lancaster said, appearing from his home office. He'd shed his suit jacket, and the sight of him in just a crisp white shirt and tailored pants was oddly unsettling. Lena, yours has a study area for your schoolwork. Lena, who hadn't spoken since their argument, just nodded and followed the housekeeper upstairs. She knows, Lancaster asked once they were alone. She figured it out. Ava wandered to the window, needing distance from his presence. She thinks I'm selling myself. Aren't you? Ava whirled to face him. Is that what you think this is? Lancaster closed the distance between them, his expression intense. I think this is a mutually beneficial arrangement between consenting adults, one that's becoming unnecessarily complicated by emotions. Because God forbid you deal with actual feelings, Ava snapped, the hormone treatments making her bold. Heaven help anyone who cracks that perfect control of yours. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He stepped closer, backing her against the window. You want to see my feelings, Ms. Carter? Fine. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her lower lip. I think about you, constantly. I wonder what sounds you'll make when I touch you, how your skin will taste if you'll say my name when you... Come. Ava's breath caught. Heat pooled low in her belly. But those aren't the kind of feelings you meant, are they? He pulled back abruptly. You want hearts and flowers. Romance. I don't do romance, Ms. Carter. I do truth. And the truth is, in 2 weeks we're going to have sex. You're going to carry my child, and then we're going to co-parent with professional courtesy and appropriate boundaries. Professional courtesy, Ava repeated, hating how breathless she sounded. Is that what you call pinning me against windows and talking about making me come? A muscle ticked in his jaw. A momentary lapse, it won't happen again. No? She stepped into his space this time. Then why is your heart racing? She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat under her palm. Why aren't you backing away? Ava. Her name was a warning on his lips. Damien. She used his first name deliberately, watching his pupils dilate. Still feeling professional? His control snapped. One hand tangled in her hair as he crushed his mouth to hers. The kiss was brutal, hungry, nothing like the business-like arrangement this was supposed to be. Ava met his intensity with her own, biting his lower lip, swallowing his groan. Just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Lancaster wrenched himself away, breathing hard. This can't happen again. Why not? Ava's voice was raw. We're supposed to sleep together anyway. Why pretend there's no attraction? Because attraction leads to attachment. Attachment leads to expectations. And expectations... He straightened his shirt with precise movements. Expectations lead to disappointment. I won't do that to my child. You mean you won't do that? To yourself. Ava shook her head. God forbid the great Damien Lancaster risk getting hurt. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. My father loved my mother, passionately, obsessively. When she died, he became something else, something cruel. His eyes met hers. I won't do that to our child. I won't let them watch love destroy their parent. The vulnerability in his voice made Ava's heart ache. And what if keeping yourself closed off destroys them just as surely? She left him standing there, staring out at the city that had shaped him into this beautiful, broken man. In her room, she touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss, and wondered if she was strong enough to break through his walls, or if she'd just end up breaking herself in the process. Living with Damien Lancaster was an exercise in controlled chaos. Every morning, Ava watched him leave for work at precisely 7:15, impeccable in custom suits that cost more than her old apartment's yearly rent. Every evening, she pretended not to notice when he returned, often working until midnight in his home office, the light spilling under his door like a warning. They had mastered the art of careful avoidance since the kiss, scheduled their fertility, appointments at different times, took meals separately, maintained what he'd called professional courtesy with the precision of heart surgeons. But today, exactly 1 week before their scheduled conception date, as Dr. Chen clinically called it, the facade cracked. Mr. Lancaster's father is here, Anna, the housekeeper, announced, just as Ava was heading to her room after her morning injection. Ava froze. Through the massive windows, she saw a sleek black car pulling up to the building's entrance. An elderly man emerged, leaning heavily on a cane, followed by what could only be security. Damien isn't home, Ava said, but the elevator was already humming to life. Richard Lancaster moved like a wounded predator, slow but dangerous. His eyes, the same steel grey as his son's, swept over Ava with calculated disdain. So, his voice was rough, probably from the cancer eating away at his brain. You're the breeding stock my son purchased. Ava's spine stiffened. I'm the mother of your future grandchild. Future? He barked out a laugh that turned into a cough. That's assuming you succeed, though given your background, I'm sure you're motivated by the financial incentives. Richard. Damien's voice cut through the tension. Ava hadn't even heard him arrive. This is unexpected. Is it? Richard settled himself on the leather sofa without invitation. When were you planning to tell the board about your little arrangement? When there was something to tell. Damien moved to stand beside Ava, close enough that she could smell his cologne. The succession plan requires an heir. I'm providing one. With her, Richard's lip curled. There are dozens of suitable women from proper families. Who would want half my fortune in divorce settlements? Damien's voice was ice. Ms. Carter and I have a clear arrangement. Do you? Richard's gaze fixed on how closely they stood. Together. Seems rather intimate for a business arrangement. Ava felt Damien tense beside her. Before he could respond, she stepped forward. Mr. Lancaster, I understand your concern for your company's future, but let me be clear. I have no interest in your family's fortune or social position. I agreed to this arrangement for my sister's education and our security. Nothing more. Bold little thing, aren't you? Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tell me, does my son know about your father, about his unfortunate end? The blood drained from Ava's face. How did you... I had you investigated, of course, thoroughly. He turned to Damien. Did you know your chosen broodmare's father died in prison? Drug charges, wasn't it? That's enough. Damien's voice was deadly quiet. Is it? The board won't think so. Lancaster Holdings has a reputation which I've maintained and expanded while you've been dying. Damien crossed to his father in 2 swift strides. You have 6 months left according to your doctors. Spend them however you wish, but if you ever speak to Ava that way again, I'll make sure you spend them alone. Richard struggled to his feet, leaning on his cane. You'd choose this girl over family. She is family. The words hung in the air, between them. She's carrying my child. After Richard left, the silence in the penthouse was deafening. Ava stood at the window watching his car disappear into Manhattan traffic. How much did your investigation miss? Damien asked quietly. About your father, the cancer, nothing. Ava turned to face him. Did yours miss anything about mine? No. He met her eyes. I knew about your father before I chose you. It wasn't relevant. Wasn't it? A drug dealer's daughter carrying the Lancaster heir? Your father's choices don't define you. Damien stepped closer. Just like mine don't. Define me. Don't they? Ava's voice cracked. You're so terrified of becoming him that you won't let yourself feel anything real. And you're so afraid of ending up like your father that you take responsibility for everyone but yourself. His words hit home with surgical precision. We're quite a pair, aren't we? We're not a pair at all. But even as she said it, Ava knew it was a lie. Something had shifted when he'd defended her to his father, when he'd called her family. Damien's phone buzzed, probably the board demanding explanations, but he didn't move to check it. Instead, he reached out and tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his touch lingering. 1 week, he said softly, then everything changes. It already has. Ava leaned into his touch despite herself. You know that, don't you? He didn't answer, but that night, for the first time since she'd moved in, his office door stayed open, the light spilling out like an invitation rather than a warning. And when Ava passed by on her way to bed, their eyes met across the space between them, a space that felt smaller with each passing day. 3 days before their scheduled date, Ava found the gossip article. Her hands shook as she read the headline on her phone, Lancaster heir's secret baby deal with employee's daughter. Someone had leaked the story, and she had a good guess who. The article painted her exactly as Richard Lancaster had, a gold digger from a criminal family, seducing her way into the Lancaster fortune. There were even photos of her entering the fertility clinic, her face partially obscured but recognizable enough. "You've seen it." Damien's voice made her jump. He stood in the kitchen doorway, his tie loosened, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "Your father works fast." Ava put her phone down. "The board must be thrilled." "The board is irrelevant." He moved to the coffee maker, his movements sharp with tension. "My PR team is handling it. Handling it how? You can't exactly deny it." "No, but we can control the narrative." He turned to face her. "We're announcing our relationship. Official press release, carefully staged photos, the works." "Our relationship?" Ava laughed bitterly. "You mean our business arrangement?" "The public won't accept that. They need a love story." "Of course they do." She stood, needing to move. "Heaven forbid the truth come out, that the great Damien Lancaster bought himself a baby and a convenient incubator." His cup slammed down on the counter. "Is that what you think this is?" "Isn't it? You said it yourself. Professional courtesy. Appropriate boundaries. Well, guess what? The boundaries just got blown to hell by your father, and now you want to pretend we're in love? Who says we're pretending?" The words hung between them like a live wire. Ava's heart thundered in her chest. "Don't! Don't what?" He stepped closer. "Don't admit that this stopped being just business the moment you walked into my office. Don't acknowledge that I think about you every second of every day. Don't tell you that defending you to my father felt more natural than breathing. Stop it." Ava backed away until she hit the counter. "You don't do romance, remember? You don't do feelings or attachment or—" His mouth crashed into hers, cutting off her words. This kiss was different from their first. Desperate, raw, like he was trying to pour every unspoken truth into it. Ava's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, even as her mind screamed at her to push him away. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her lips. "Tell me this is just business." Instead, she kissed him harder, biting his lower lip. His groan vibrated through her as his hands slid down to her hips, lifting her onto the counter. Her legs wrapped around his waist instinctively, drawing him closer. "Ava." Her name was a prayer on his lips as he kissed down her neck. "We should wait. The doctors. I don't care." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I'm tired of waiting. Tired of pretending this isn't what we both want." Something dark and hungry flashed in his gaze. "If we do this now, then we do it because we want to, not because a doctor scheduled it." He studied her face for a long moment. Then, without warning, he scooped her up in his arms. Ava yelped, in surprise, clinging to his shoulders as he carried her toward the stairs. "Your room or mine?" he asked, his voice rough. A door slammed somewhere above them. "Ava?" Lena's voice drifted down. "Are you home? I saw the article." Reality crashed back like a bucket of ice water. Damien set Ava down carefully, taking a deliberate step back. His breathing was ragged, his shirt wrinkled where she'd gripped it. "I should—" Ava gestured vaguely upstairs. "Yes." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I have a board meeting anyway." "Right. The board." She straightened her own clothes. "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth." His eyes met. Hers. "That this arrangement is more complicated than originally planned." "Is that what we're calling it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "What would you call it?" Before she could answer, Lena appeared on the stairs. She took in their disheveled appearance, the tension crackling between them, and her eyes widened. "I'll come back later," she said quickly. "No, stay." Damien was already retreating to his office. "I was just leaving." Ava watched him go, her body still humming from his touch. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. They had a contract, a schedule, clear boundaries. But boundaries meant nothing when her heart raced every time he entered a room, when his touch felt like coming home. "So," Lena's voice was careful. "Just a business arrangement, huh?" Ava sank onto the nearest chair. "I don't know what it is anymore." "I think you do." Her sister sat beside her. "And I think that's what scares you both." Later that night, Ava lay awake, staring at her ceiling. Down the hall, she could hear Damien pacing in his office, his footsteps a reminder of everything that had shifted between them. In 3 days, they were supposed to conceive a child together, but after today, after that kiss. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "We need to talk." 3 words that could mean everything or nothing. Ava closed her eyes, remembering the taste of his lips, the feel of his hands on her skin. They did need to talk, but she was beginning to fear that words wouldn't be enough to explain what was happening between them. Past midnight, Ava found herself outside Damien's office, her hand poised to knock. Through the partially open door, she could see him at his desk, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He was staring at his computer screen, but his fingers were still on the keyboard. "Are you going to come in or stand there all night?" he asked without looking up. Ava pushed the door open. "Your text said we need to talk." "The board wants to dissolve our contract." He finally met her eyes. "They're concerned about the company's image. Can they do that? They can try." His jaw tightened. "My father's been busy. He's convinced several key members that this arrangement poses a risk to Lancaster Holdings." Ava sank into the chair across from his desk. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Damien stood, circling the desk to lean against it in front of her. "Now I remind them exactly who runs this company." "And us?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "What happens with us?" His expression softened. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're still interested in maintaining professional courtesy and appropriate boundaries." His voice was low, dangerous. "Because after this afternoon, I'm not sure I can." Heat bloomed in Ava's chest. "Maybe I don't want you to." He reached out, tracing her jawline with his thumb. "Do you have any idea what you do to me? How hard it is to watch you move through my home, knowing I can't touch you." "Then touch me." She stood, stepping between his legs. "Stop fighting this." His hands settled on her hips, pulling her closer. "If we do this, if we change the terms of our arrangement, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back." Ava ran her hands up his chest, feeling his heart race under her palms. "I want—" A sharp knock interrupted them. Anna, the housekeeper, appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. "Mr. Lancaster, your father is on his way up, with reporters," Damien cursed, pushing away from the desk. "How many?" "3, from the major networks." Anna wrung her hands. "They're live broadcasting." "He's forcing our hand." Damien ran a hand through his hair. "Making us go public on his terms." Ava's mind raced. "Unless we beat him to it." "What do you mean?" "You said we need a love story?" She grabbed his phone from the desk, pulling up his social media. "Let's give them one, but on our terms." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're sure? No more hiding. No more pretending this is just business." She handed him the phone. "Show them. Show your father that he can't control this narrative." Damien studied her face for a moment, then began typing. Ava read over his shoulder as he composed a post. "Some arrangements become destiny. Some contracts become promises. And sometimes the best business decisions lead to the greatest personal revelations. Yes, the rumors are true. Ava Carter and I are expecting a child. What the rumors don't mention is that somewhere between the contract and the conception, I fell in love." Ava's breath caught. "Love?" He looked up from the phone. "Too much?" "No." She touched his face, feeling the slight tremor in his jaw. Not enough. The elevator dinged in the distance. Voices approached, Richard Lancaster's commanding tone mixed with eager reporters' questions. "Last chance to back out," Damien murmured. Instead of answering, Ava kissed him. She felt him smile against her lips as he snapped a photo, adding it to the post. Just as Richard and the reporters rounded the corner, Damien hit share. "Well, well," Richard's voice dripped with disdain. "How convenient." "Actually, Father," Damien kept his arm around Ava's waist, "your timing is perfect. I believe you and your media friends just witnessed a Lancaster Holdings exclusive." The reporters' phones buzzed simultaneously as the post went live. Cameras swung toward them as questions erupted. "Mr. Lancaster, is this an official announcement? How long have you been together? Was this planned?" Damien faced them with the confidence that had built his empire. "Ava and I met through unconventional circumstances. What began as a mutual arrangement evolved into something neither of us expected. We're sharing our story now because certain parties," his eyes flicked to his father, "seemed determined to twist it into something ugly. The truth is simple. We're having a child together, and we couldn't be happier." "And the contract?" Richard's voice cut through the chaos. "Tell them about the money, the terms, the original contract is void," Damien interrupted. "Ava and I will be drawing up new terms, personal terms, including, if she'll agree, marriage." Ava's head snapped up. This wasn't part of the plan, but looking at Damien's face, she realized it wasn't a publicity stunt. His eyes held a question, one that had nothing to do with reporters or scandal or his father's schemes. "Yes," she heard herself say. The word felt right, felt true. "New terms sound perfect." The Richard Lancaster's face purpled with rage, but the reporters were eating it up. The ruthless businessman transformed by love, the modern fairy tale of it all. Cameras flashed as Damien pulled Ava closer, kissing her with a tenderness that belied his powerful image. Later, after the media circus had left and Richard had stormed out with threats of board meetings and legal action, Ava and Damien stood at their favorite window, watching the city lights. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "About falling in love?" He turned her to face him. "I meant every word, though I should probably do this properly." He sank to one knee, pulling a ring box from his pocket. "I've had this for a week, been trying. To find the courage to admit that this stopped being business the moment I met you." Tears blurred Ava's vision as he opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond that somehow managed to look both elegant and understated. "Ava Carter, will you marry me? Not for contracts or headlines or my father's succession plan, but because somewhere between the arrangements and the arguments you became everything." She pulled him to his feet, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Yes. But not because you're Damien Lancaster, billionaire CEO. Because you're the man who defended me to his father, who makes sure I eat when I'm too busy to remember, who looks at me like I'm worth more than any contract." His smile was soft, real, just for her. "We're going to have to rewrite quite a few documents." "Later," she whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. "Right now, I believe we have some non-contractual obligations to fulfill." As he lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward his bedroom, Ava realized that sometimes the best endings come from broken rules and rewritten stories, and sometimes the most binding contracts are the ones written not on paper, but on hearts. Ava woke to the sound of heated voices from Damien's home office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his bedroom, their bedroom, now. But the warmth didn't reach the cold knot forming in her stomach as she recognized Richard Lancaster's voice. "You've lost your mind," Richard was saying. "The board meeting is in an hour. This is your last chance to fix this mess." "There's nothing to fix." Damien's voice was steel. The engagement announcement goes live at noon. Then you leave me no choice. Ava slipped out of bed, pulling on Damien's discarded dress shirt from the night before. By the time she reached the office, Richard was gone, but his presence lingered like a toxic cloud. Damien stood at the window, his shoulders tense. He's going to make a play for control of the company. Can he do that? He's convinced 3 board members to back him. Damien turned, his expression softening at the sight of her in his shirt. He's arguing that my judgment is compromised, that this relationship proves I'm unfit to lead. Ava crossed to him, placing a hand on his chest. What do you need me to do? Nothing. He covered her hand with his. This is my fight. No, it's ours. She met his eyes. I won't let him destroy what you've built because of me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Have I told you today that I love you? Not since 3 a.m. She rose on tiptoes to kiss him. When you woke me up to say it again. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant. The board's gathering early. I have to go. He cupped her face. Whatever happens today, go. She straightened his tie. Show them why you're the only one who can run this company. After he left, Ava tried to keep busy. She helped Lena with college applications, arranged meetings with wedding planners, and ignored the constant ping of news alerts about her engagement. But her mind kept drifting to the board meeting, to Richard's threats. Around noon, her phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. Ms. Carter, this is Claire Montgomery from the board of Lancaster Holdings. We'd like you to join us. Ava's heart raced. Join you? Yes, immediately if possible. A car is already waiting downstairs. The Lancaster Holdings boardroom was all mahogany and money, 20 stern faces staring at her as she entered. Damien stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Richard sat opposite him, a triumphant smile playing at his lips. Ms. Carter, Richard's voice dripped false courtesy. Thank you for joining us. We were just discussing your unique position in the company. My position? She remained standing, channeling every ounce of strength she'd learned from years of fighting her own battles. As both Mr. Lancaster's fiancée and a rather expensive company investment. Richard slid a document across the table. The original contract stipulated quite generous terms that some might see as corporate misappropriation. That contract is void, Damien cut in. As I've already explained. Is it? Richard turned to the board members. Or is this simply an attempt to cover up financial impropriety with a convenient love story? Ava felt the room shift, saw doubt creep into the board members' eyes. Then she remembered something, a detail from her first meeting with Damien. Mr. Lancaster, she addressed Richard directly. When did you first learn about the contract? He blinked. What? A simple question. When did you discover the arrangement between your son and me? Last week, of course. When any responsible board member would have, lying doesn't suit you, Richard. Damien's voice was quiet, but carried to every corner. Tell them the truth. Tell them how you helped draft the original contract. The room erupted in murmurs. Richard's face paled. That's right, Ava continued, her voice steady. You knew about this arrangement from the beginning. You approved it. The only thing you didn't approve of was your son actually falling in love. Is this true? Claire Montgomery demanded. Richard struggled to his feet, leaning on his cane. The succession plan required an heir, Damien interrupted. Which I'm providing. The company's interests are protected. The only thing threatening Lancaster Holdings now is your desperate grab for power. We've heard enough. Claire stood. Mr. Lancaster, Richard, I believe it's time for you to retire fully and immediately. You can't We can and we will. Another board member joined her. Your manipulations end today. The vote was unanimous. Richard Lancaster was stripped of his remaining powers in the company he'd built. As security escorted him out, he paused beside Ava. You'll regret this, he hissed. Both of you. No, father. Damien took Ava's hand. The only regret would have been letting you turn me into you. After the board dispersed, Ava and Damien stood alone in the vast room. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said, pulling her close. Which part? Coming here or confronting your father? Both. He kissed her forehead. Thank you. For what? For fighting for us, for seeing through his games. His eyes were intense. For making me strong enough to finally stand up to him. Ava traced his jaw with her fingers. You were always strong enough. You just needed someone to remind you. They left the boardroom hand in hand, but Ava couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Richard Lancaster wasn't a man who accepted defeat gracefully, and something in his final threat felt too certain, too confident. What did he know that they didn't? 2 weeks after the board meeting, Ava sat in Dr. Chen's office, staring at the ultrasound screen in disbelief. Damien's hand tightened around hers as the doctor smiled. Congratulations, Dr. Chen said. You're already pregnant? From before the scheduled date, it seems. The kitchen encounter, the night of heated kisses and unplanned passion. Nature, it seemed, had its own timeline. How far along? Damien's voice was rough with emotion. About 3 weeks. Dr. Chen handed them the ultrasound printout. Everything looks perfect. Perfect. The word echoed in Ava's mind as they rode the elevator down to the parking garage. They had done everything backward. Contract, pregnancy, love, engagement. But somehow it had all fallen into place. Until Damien's phone rang. His face darkened as he listened. When? A pause. I understand. Lock down everything. He ended the call, his jaw tight. What's wrong? My father. Damien ran a hand through his hair. He's been busy these past 2 weeks, moving money, making calls. He just transferred majority ownership of Lancaster Holdings to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Can he do that? No, but he did. Damien's eyes met hers. He's trying to ensure our child never inherits the company. The garage felt suddenly cold. What do? We fight. He touched her stomach gently. For our family. But Richard Lancaster had one final card to play. When they arrived home, they found Lena waiting with a thick manila envelope. This came for you, she said, her face pale. Ava, it's about Dad. Inside were prison records, court transcripts, and one devastating revelation. Their father hadn't died in prison as they'd believed. He was very much alive, living under a new name after turning state's evidence. And Richard Lancaster knew exactly where to find him. He's threatening to expose him, Ava whispered. The people he testified against. They'd kill him. Your father made his choices, Damien said quietly. But you don't have to pay for them. Don't I? She showed him the note at the bottom. Either Ava ends the engagement and terminates the pregnancy, or her father's location goes public. No, Damien's voice was steel. I won't let him do this. We don't have a choice. We always have a choice. He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. Agent Morrison, it's Damien Lancaster. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of federal agents, witness protection officers, and corporate lawyers. Ava learned that her father had already been moved to a new location, his safety secured before Richard could act. And Lancaster Holdings? The attempted transfer had triggered every corporate safeguard Damien had put in place years ago. Your father forgot who modernized the company's security systems, Damien explained, as they watched federal agents lead Richard away in handcuffs. He tried to steal my company and threaten my family. Now he gets to experience federal prison himself. Family, Ava repeated softly. We really are that now, aren't we? He pulled her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. We were family the moment you walked into my office and challenged every assumption I had about love. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Ava traced patterns on Damien's chest. Do you regret any of it? The contract, the scandal, all of it? No. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. Every choice, every mistake, every fight led us here. Led me to you. Even the part where your father's going to jail. He made his choice. Damien's voice was firm but sad. Just like I made mine when I chose love over fear. And now, she smiled against his skin. What choice are you making? Now. He rolled her beneath him, his eyes intense. Now I choose us. Every day, every moment, I choose our family. 9 months later, in a private hospital room overlooking the city where their story began, Ava held their daughter for the first time. She had Damien's steel-grey eyes and Ava's dark curls, and she was perfect. Charlotte, Damien whispered, touching their daughter's tiny hand. After your mother. Tears blurred Ava's vision. She would have loved her. Love you. As much as I love you both. He kissed Ava's forehead. Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Lena burst in then, NYU acceptance letter. In hand, she'd gotten early admission with a full scholarship anyway, making the trust fund just a bonus. She froze at the sight of the baby. Come meet your niece, Ava said softly. As Lena cooed over Charlotte, Ava looked at Damien. His eyes held the same wonder she felt, that somehow their business arrangement had given them not just a child, but a real family. Love hadn't made them weak as he'd feared. It had made them stronger than they'd ever been alone. What are you thinking? He asked, catching her gaze. That some contracts are meant to be broken. She smiled. And some loves are meant to be written in stone instead of on paper. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, as their daughter grabbed his finger with surprising strength. Outside, New York City glittered in the twilight, the same view they'd shared during their first meeting, but now it wasn't a backdrop for business negotiations. It was the beginning of their story, a story of two broken people who found wholeness in each other, who turned a calculated arrangement into an unconditional love. And as Charlotte drifted to sleep in her arms, Ava realized that sometimes the best business decisions aren't about money or power or control. Sometimes they're about having the courage to let love rewrite all the rules. The end. That was a beautiful story, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your collaboration is very important to me.